Welcome back, everyone. It's John, Wade Boggs fan. Hope everyone's doing well. For today's video, I wanted to talk about what grading criteria matters most to you when it comes to vintage cards. And it could be, we're talking raw or graded. Which of the four criteria, when you look at cards, matters most to you? Before I get into that topic, though, I thought I would do the answer to my previous video's trivia question. So we'll get that out of the way. So the question from my last video was, who is the oldest player to lead MLB in home runs? Now, most of you got the correct answer. I did give you a hint. I don't know if that helped you guys or not. But the correct answer is Darrell Evans. Yep, he was 38 years old in 1985 when he hit 40 home runs, and that just happened to be the only year that he led the majors in home runs. There were three other guesses, I believe, looking at the comments. One of them was Barry Bonds. Now, he was age 36 the year he hit 73 home runs and led the majors. There was another guess for Boog Powell, and interestingly enough, Boog Powell never led even the American League in home runs. And the third guess was Nelson Cruz. Now, he did lead all of Major League Baseball in home runs, but he was 33. Now, so far, he's leading in 2021, I believe. He is leading at least the American League, in home runs. I think he has 7. But yep, the correct answer is Darrell Evans for the Detroit Tigers. So okay, now into my back to my topic for today. There are 4 major grading criteria. You have centering, you have surface, you have edges, and you have corners. Now, again, this video is just going to explain and show off some of those differences. I grabbed some of my raw vintage cards to show off and give some examples. Now, I'm going to talk about my personal preference, all right? And what I'd like to learn in the comments is, what are your preferences in order? So what is your most important all the way down to the least important when you're looking at vintage cards? Now, of course, modern cards are a lot different. There's so many different small little nuances, say from a 9 to a 10, or even from an 8 to a 9 sometimes. Usually when you get to an 8, it's either a surface or centering issue, maybe a slightly dinged corner. But obviously with vintage cards, you see those differences, more glaring differences, just because of the printing methods back then, and of course the age of the card, that unless they were kept pristine right out of the pack, and even back then, you could get something pack fresh and it could still be way off centered. Usually the surface, unless you have one that's stuck to the wax of the pack, or if there was gum in the pack, you'd get those types of stains and surface issues. But typically, vintage cards, for the most part, except for some rare examples, have some wear to them. So, all right. So the first example that I'm going to show you here is, I'm going to get my glasses on here, is a centering issue. All right. Now, the example I have here is the 1961 Topps Mickey Mantle, showing the highlight of the 1960 World Series. And as you can see, the top border is pretty much non-existent. It's gone. Way off center, even left to right off center. All right. Now, I probably had this card for 20, 25 years. I don't know. I'm sure I got this from my local card shop. Not sure why I bought it other than the fact that it's a Mickey Mantle. Now, for me, centering is the first thing and the most important thing that I look for. All right. Now, it may not be for you, which is fine. But again, for me, centering. So if I were looking for this card to get in a PSA grade, I would pass. I don't care what the grade was that this was given. I'd pass on this card just because of how far it is off-centered. To me, the way my brain works, when I look at this card, I don't see, Mickey Mantle, hitting swinging for a home run. I don't see the design of the card. All my eyes focus on is the centering. Now, even the back. Let me turn this around here. Now, the back's complete. Okay, you see maybe a little bit of a surface issue there. Okay, but that's for another card. The back is intact. It's all there. It's pretty, good shape. The card doesn't seem to have many creases. The corners are, a little worn. But for the most part, the only flaw, the major flaw that this card has is the centering. All right, so this would be a hard pass for me if I were to buy this, even raw. But since I'm buying PSA graded copies, this would be a hard pass for me. All right, the next criteria I want to show off is surface, and here we are going to take a look at my 1964 Topps Yogi Berra. Now, as you can see, there are. Let me turn around here. Okay, so you can see there's some major creases. There's one right there. There's one on the top. That's probably some print mark. It's not dirt or anything like that. Maybe like a roller mark, or that may even get a was it an MK designation? Because who knows, that could be a pen or a marker even, and maybe not from the printing process. But centering on it is pretty good. All right, but again, when I look at this card, while I notice the centering and say, okay, that first gets my attention, the second thing that shows up are the major creases, and I think you can even see them. You may not be able to see them because of the cardstock on the back. It actually doesn't look like a lot of those creases have gone through all the way. Which is interesting based on how those creases look. They're sort of just on the surface on the front, but again, it's enough for me as the second criteria to pass on this card. Again, even though for me, centering is the one criteria I look at. Second is surface. All right. So again, looking at this card, if this was in a PSA, and again, whatever grade it would get, would be a pass for me because it doesn't pass the surface. Now, again, there could be some small creases. I have I want to say it's a 57 Willie Mays that does have a crease to it, but you really have to look. It's sort of off the side of his picture in the background, and it's really hard to spot. In the right light, you can see it, but if you just normally look at the card, it's not as glaring. So I didn't mind picking up that card. All right. So there's the second example of the grading criteria. Right. The third one is edges. Right. So this is, and I keep forgetting whether this is a 61. I keep forgetting the design of these. Let's just say it's 61, and you can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. 61 Fleer Honus Wagner. All right. Now, when it comes to centering, it's off left to right. There's a little bit of a diamond cut you can see at the top there. The border goes from a little bit, and then the white gets a little bit more as you move over to the right. On the bottom, it's somewhat noticeable as well. Um, so centering it for me would have its issues. But if you notice, this edge right here is pretty sharp. Okay. But if you notice this edge, and let's see if I can move right up here a little bit. See how that's jagged? And again, it may just be, this may have come out of the pack that way. All right. Again, the printing process back then wasn't as good as it is today. So sometimes you get those cut marks. And even if the grading company factors in and doesn't really knock the grade off that much, if I have a card that I notice edges like that, and again, sometimes pictures on eBay, if you're looking at a card, you just see this. So it may be hard to see. Now there, you can still see some of the whiting on the edges frayed there on the right side of the card. But again, not as important to me. So this would be third on my criteria of I don't really care that much. Okay? But again, this card would most likely be a pass for me because of the centering. All right. Now, the surface appears to be good. Oh, sorry for the glare there. I don't see really many, if any, creases to the card. Okay, there's the back. All right, the back looks like in good shape. Okay, for those, that are looking at corners, for the most part, the corners look fairly sharp. There's a little bit of corner wear. Okay. But again, it would be one that it's off-centered enough that I'd pass on the card. Okay. So the last criteria, which is for me probably the least important. All right. So again, for me, it's centering, then surface. Are there any creases in the card or whatever? To some extent, and I guess the edges and the last criteria, which is the corners. Okay, those two are sort of tied. I mean, it could run either way for me. Um, corners, yeah. I mean, or edges. Sorry, edges again, not that big of a deal. But here's an example of a 1972 Willie Mays. And if you look at, okay, there we go. So if you look at this here, this card has great centering. All right. The doesn't seem to appear to have any creases to it. The edges seem pretty clean. Maybe that edge, there on the left-hand side, maybe just a little bit. Okay, but for the most part, well centered, nice focus, nice surface. All right, edges seem to be fine, but the corners. Okay, well, let's first take a look at the back here. All right, and again, the back looks nice and clean. All right, no creases. Centering's fairly well, but the corners. Okay, so if you look here in the bottom left, all right, you're going to see a bending of that corner a little bit. Okay, that's definitely a ding corner, and these top corners here definitely have some wear to them, right? So if corners were your main criteria, this would probably be a card that maybe you would pass on. For me, this may be one that someday I may decide to get graded, knowing that it would get dinged because of the corner wear. Okay. But the centering, I mean, to me, that is a really sharp looking Willie Mays. Now, again, I'd have to look and see, if this were to get a 5 or 6, maybe a 5, let's say. I don't know. You tell me. What do you think this would grade at? If this were a 5, and I would spend the money and the time to get it graded whenever PSA opens back up, all right. I'd have to weigh whether it makes sense for me to grade this or see how much it would cost to just buy one already graded. Maybe I could afford a 6 if this came in a 5. But anyway, this would be one that I would consider buying. This is my wheelhouse here for vintage cards. All right. Great centering, no creases. Edges are good, but what takes away from the card are the corners. And I'm willing to sacrifice corners for, to me, that's a great visually appealing vintage card. So there you go. Yeah, again, I'd be very interested in learning what are your, what's the ranking for the 4 criteria that you look for when you are buying it. Again, it doesn't have to be, I'm not talking about graded, it could be raw. Whenever you're looking to add a vintage card to your collection, and you may very well come back and say, John, I don't care about any of those criteria. If I can find a copy of a card that I want, and I think it looks good, and I can get it for a decent price, I want it in my collection. I know some of you sort of look for cards that are like well loved, that have creases, that have corner wear. So you may say, again, none of those criteria matter to me. I just want a copy of this particular card, and that's great. So again, just want to see what your criteria are. Let me know in the comments of this video. And next video that I'm going to be putting together, um, I received a care package from a fellow YouTuber. I'll reveal that in my next video. Not exactly sure what I got, but looking forward to opening it up and showing it off to you. That's all I have for you, as always. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.